He said I walked out, but I was the one changing the diapers. I'm Amber Collins, and I'm 33 years old. I'm just your average American woman, born and raised in a small town in Pennsylvania, living a life I once thought would be simple, peaceful, maybe even a little boring in the best way. But life has a funny way of flipping the script, doesn't it? If you told 25-year-old me that in just a few years, I'd be sitting here sharing this story because of one man's lies and the storm that followed, I wouldn't have believed you. But here I am, ready to open up about how it all began. The good, the bad, and the ugly. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. I love seeing how far these stories travel. I was 25 when I met Tyler. I still remember that first encounter so vividly. I just moved to Pittsburgh for work, excited and nervous about this next chapter. I didn't know many people in the city, so when my coworker invited me to a friend's birthday party downtown, I said yes without hesitation. That night, I wasn't really expecting anything, just hoping for some good music, maybe a glass of wine, and a chance to be around people after a long week. But then I saw him. Tyler had this kind of easy confidence that immediately drew people in. Tall, athletic, with this messy, boyish hair that looked like he'd just run his fingers through it before walking out the door. And that smile, the kind that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. He introduced himself, offered me a drink, and before I knew it, we were tucked into a quiet corner, talking about everything and nothing for hours. Looking back, I see how quickly I fell for him. He had charm, no doubt about it. He was funny, attentive, and made me feel seen in a way that I hadn't felt in a long time. After that night, we started spending more and more time together. Late-night drives, lazy Sunday mornings, spontaneous road trips just because. We talked about everything. Our dreams, our fears, where we saw ourselves in 5 years. And somewhere along the way, those talks turned into plans. We started imagining a future together. Marriage wasn't a maybe in those conversations, it was a when. We talked about buying a house, raising kids, building a life side by side. And I believed him. I believed in us. But as I replay those memories now, I also remember the little things I brushed aside. The moments that should have made me pause. Like how easily his temper flared when something didn't go his way. At first, it was small stuff, getting frustrated in traffic, snapping at a waiter over a wrong order. I tell myself, we all have bad days. But those moments became more frequent. And then there was his spending. Tyler liked to live large. Fancy dinners, new gadgets, expensive clothes. At first, it felt exciting to be swept up in that world. But soon, I started noticing how often he'd max out his credit card, borrow from friends, or even from me. He'd always promise to pay it back, always have an excuse ready. I wanted to believe him. I did believe him, more often than I should have. The biggest red flag, though, was his way with words. Tyler could talk his way out of anything. If he forgot something important or messed up, he'd twist the story until I almost felt like I was the one at fault. He'd lie about little things, a late meeting that never happened, money that was coming soon. I told myself they were harmless fibs, that no one's perfect. But deep down, I felt that pit in my stomach, that voice telling me something wasn't right. When I found out I was pregnant, everything changed. For me, anyway. I remember standing in our tiny bathroom, holding that positive test, my heart racing with a mix of shock and joy. I was scared, sure, but I was also excited. I'd always wanted to be a mom, and in that moment, I believed we could handle this together. I told Tyler that evening. I thought he'd be happy. But his reaction, it wasn't what I expected. His face went pale, and he just sat there in silence for what felt like forever. When he finally spoke, it was all about him. How this would affect his plans, his freedom, his money. He didn't say anything about the baby. He didn't hug me, didn't smile. Just worry, frustration, and if I'm honest, fear. I tried to stay hopeful. I told myself it was just shock, that he'd come around. But as the weeks went on, things got worse. Tyler started staying out later and later, At first, it was work, then it was drinks with friends, then it was excuses I couldn't even follow. Nights when I was home alone, sick from morning sickness that lasted all day, wondering where he was, what he was doing. The resentment started to build, on both sides. He made little jabs about how needy I was being, about how I was ruining things by stressing about money or doctor's appointments. He didn't come to most of those appointments, by the way. Always had a reason he couldn't make it, and I stopped asking after a while because the disappointment hurt too much. I tried everything to hold us together. I reminded him of our plans, our dreams, the promises we'd made. But he pulled further away, and no matter how hard I fought for us, I felt like I was fighting alone. There were nights I'd sit in the nursery we'd barely started, surrounded by paint samples and unopened boxes, and cry until I couldn't anymore. I kept thinking, this isn't how it was supposed to be. We were supposed to be a team. We were supposed to be excited, planning for our baby girl together. I see now how much I ignored, how much I excused in the name of love and hope. I kept waiting for the Tyler I'd first met, the one who made me feel like I was his world. But that man was slipping further away with each passing day, and all I had left was the reality I didn't want to face. That was the beginning of the end. The cracks were too deep, the damage too done. And as much as I wanted to believe we could fix it, the truth was, we were falling apart, and soon, I'd be left to pick up the pieces on my own. I'll never forget the night Mia was born. I'd been in labor for what felt like forever, hours blurring together in that sterile hospital room, the beep of machines, the soft shuffle of nurses' feet, the hushed voices that tried to offer comfort but couldn't quite drown out my fear. It was the kind of fear that grips you down to your bones, not because you don't want what's coming, but because you know the weight of it, the enormity of what's about to change. I was about to become a mother. Tyler was there, at least in body. He sat in the corner of the room, scrolling on his phone between contractions, barely glancing up unless a nurse asked him something directly. I kept searching his face for some spark of excitement, some glimmer of shared anticipation, but it wasn't there. His expression was blank, like he was just waiting for it to be over so he could go back to whatever he'd rather be doing. When Mia finally arrived, all tiny fists and furious cries, I felt like my heart had been cracked wide open. There she was, this perfect, wriggling little human I'd carried for 9 months. The rush of love was instant and overwhelming, mixed with relief that she was safe, that I'd made it through. I reached for Tyler, wanting to share that moment with him, but he hesitated. He gave Mia a quick glance, then awkwardly held her for a single photo the nurse insisted on snapping. That was it. No tears, no smile, no whispered promises to our daughter. Just a man going through the motions, and me trying not to let my heart break in front of everyone. The first night in the hospital was a blur. I was exhausted, sore, and sorely in need of sleep, but every tiny noise Mia made jolted me upright. I kept checking that she was breathing, that she was warm enough, that she was okay. Tyler fell asleep in the chair in the corner, snoring softly, oblivious to the tidal wave of responsibility crashing over me. Coming home should have felt like a new beginning, but instead, it felt like being dropped into the deep end without a life jacket. Mia cried almost constantly. I tried everything, feeding, burping, rocking, singing, but nothing seemed to soothe her for long. The nights were the hardest. I'd pace the apartment, holding her close, whispering to her, begging her to settle. The apartment would be dark and quiet except for her cries and my own quiet sobs when I thought no one could hear. Tyler, when he was home, was no help. At first, he'd at least pretend to try. He'd hold her for a few minutes before handing her back with a frustrated sigh, saying he didn't know what to do. But that didn't last long. Soon his excuses started. He was too stressed from work, or he was too tired, because he hadn't slept well, or his back hurt, or he had an early morning. And then there were the nights he wasn't home at all, out with friends or claiming he needed time to clear his head. I kept hoping things would get better. I kept thinking maybe if I tried harder, if I was more patient, if I didn't nag him for help, he'd step up. But deep down, I knew I was already on my own. I was the one up at all hours, the one tracking feedings and diaper changes, the one Googling every little symptom at 3 a.m. because I was too afraid to trust my own instincts. Mia's colic was relentless. Every evening like clockwork, the crying would start and go on for hours. I'd walk circles through the apartment, bouncing her gently, singing lullabies through my tears. Some nights I'd stand by the window, staring out at the empty street, wondering how the world could be so quiet and peaceful while mine felt like it was crumbling. There were moments, in the dead of night, where I felt like I was disappearing. Like I'd become invisible to everyone except this tiny baby who needed me for everything. I'd think about the promises Tyler and I had made to each other, the plans we'd had for this little family, and it felt like I'd been left holding the pieces of a dream that wasn't real anymore. What made it harder was the isolation. People assume that new mothers are surrounded by support, but that wasn't my reality. My own family lived states away, and while they checked in when they could, there wasn't much they could do from a distance. Tyler's family rarely called or visited, and when they did, it was short and awkward, like they didn't know what to say or how to help. Tyler, for his part, became more of a ghost in our home. He'd come and go, offering empty promises that he'd do better, or that he just needed time to adjust. But the time never came. The help never came. The adjustment never happened. I remember one night, probably the lowest of all. Mia had been crying for what felt like hours, and I was so tired I could barely see straight. I sat on the edge of the bed, holding her, rocking her gently, tears streaming down my face. I looked over at Tyler, sleeping soundly, completely untouched by the chaos and exhaustion that filled every inch of my world. I wanted to shake him awake, to scream, to make him see what I was going through. But I didn't. I just kept rocking, kept crying, kept going because I didn't have a choice. Those first few months were a blur of exhaustion and heartbreak. There were moments of joy, of course. Mia's first real smile, the way she'd grip my finger, the softness of her cheek against mine. Those moments kept me going. But they were bittersweet, shadowed by the loneliness that came from realizing I was doing this alone, even when I wasn't supposed to be. I held on to hope longer than I should have. I kept believing Tyler would change, that he'd wake up one day and realize what he was missing. But as Mia grew, it became clearer and clearer that the only person I could count on was myself. And as hard as that was to accept, it was also the beginning of finding my own strength. Every sleepless night, every tear-filled feeding, every quiet moment where I felt like I couldn't go on, I survived them. I got Mia through them. And even though I was angry, even though I was heartbroken, I loved that little girl fiercely. That love became the fuel that kept me going, even when I felt like I had nothing left to give. Looking back now, I see that those nights, those struggles, were shaping me into the mother I am today. They taught me resilience, patience, and a depth of love I didn't know I was capable of. I didn't get the support I deserved from Tyler, but I learned to be the support Mia needed. And that, in the end, mattered more than anything. If you had asked me in those early days of being with Tyler whether I could ever imagine him walking out on me and our daughter, I would have laughed and said no way. Even through all the tension, the late nights he didn't come home, the way he pulled away more and more, I kept holding on to the hope that he wouldn't actually leave. I thought maybe this was just a rough patch, something we could work through, that he just needed time to adjust to being a dad. I kept telling myself that. I needed to believe it, because the alternative was too terrifying to face. But the truth was, things had been spiraling for a while. The fights had become our normal. It felt like we couldn't talk about anything without it turning into an argument. Sometimes it started over something small, me asking him to take out the trash or hold Mia for a few minutes so I could shower. Other times it was bigger, me begging him to be home more, to help out, to show up as a partner, as a father. Every time, it ended the same. Tyler would accuse me of nagging, of trying to control him. He'd roll his eyes, raise his voice, sometimes punch a wall or slam a door on his way out. And me. I'd sit there holding Mia, trying to soothe her while swallowing back the sobs building in my chest. I started to feel like I was losing my mind. Like maybe I was the problem. Maybe I was too emotional, too demanding. That's what he told me over and over. I remember one night so vividly it still makes my chest ache. Mia had been fussy all day, and I hadn't slept more than a couple of hours in the past 2 nights. I was running on empty, physically and emotionally. I asked Tyler if he could stay home that evening, just one night, to help me get her settled so I could try to sleep for a bit. His face darkened, and he snapped, "God, Amber, Do you ever stop complaining? I work all day, and I come home to this? I can't do anything right by you. I stood there, stunned. All I'd done was ask for help. Just a little help. But he didn't see that. Or maybe he didn't want to. I tried to keep my voice calm, to reason with him, to remind him that Mia was our responsibility. But he wasn't listening. He never really listened. The tension kept building after that. Every conversation felt like walking on eggshells. Every interaction left me more drained. I tried so hard to keep it together, for Mia's sake. I told myself if I could just hang on a little longer, he'd come around. That we'd find our way back to each other. But that night came, the night he left, and everything changed. It was a Tuesday. I remember that because Mia had her 2-month checkup that morning. Tyler hadn't come, of course. He said he had work, though I didn't ask for details anymore because I knew I wouldn't get the truth. That evening, I made dinner, though I barely touched mine because I was so tired I felt sick. Mia was asleep, finally, after another long day of crying and fussing. Tyler came in late, smelling of beer and cigarettes. His eyes were hard, his jaw clenched. I could feel it before he even spoke. The storm that was coming. He threw his keys down, kicked off his shoes, and started pacing the living room. I asked him where he'd been, and that was all it took. He exploded. Said he was sick of this life, sick of feeling trapped, sick of me making everything his fault. He called me controlling, said I treated him like a child, said I made him feel like a failure. I tried to stay calm, tried to reason with him, but it was like trying to put out a fire with my bare hands. And then he said it. Those words that still echo in my head. You figure it out. You're so good at controlling everything. He grabbed a bag, shoved some clothes into it, and walked out the door. Just like that. No discussion. No goodbye to Mia. No second glance. I stood there, frozen, listening to the sound of the door slamming shut, the silence that followed heavier than any scream. My legs gave out, and I sank to the floor, shaking, trying to catch my breath. I kept thinking, this isn't happening. He'll come back. He just needs to cool off. But he didn't come back. Not that night. Not the next day. Not the day after. The next morning, I woke up hoping it was all a bad dream, but the emptiness beside me in the bed told me it wasn't. I had Mia to care for, rent to pay, groceries to buy. There was no time to fall apart, no time to grieve the loss of the man I thought I'd spend my life with. I had to keep going, even though every part of me felt broken. I called him, texted him, begged him to come home, to talk to me, to think about Mia. Sometimes he'd respond, usually with cold, clipped messages. I need space. You'll be fine. Stop guilt-tripping me. Other times, I'd get nothing at all. The loneliness was crushing. Nights were the hardest. I'd sit in the dim light of Mia's room, rocking her, listening to the quiet hum of the city outside, and feel like I was the last person on earth. I felt abandoned, not just by Tyler, but by the dream we'd built together. The man who'd promised forever had walked away without a second thought, and I was left to pick up the pieces. I had to figure out rent on my own. Baby supplies. Formula. Diapers. Doctor's visits. I had to find a way to work, to make ends meet, to survive. And through it all, I had to put on a brave face for Mia, because she deserved a mother who could hold it together, even when it felt impossible. I cried a lot in those days. In the shower, where no one could hear. In the middle of the night, when Mia was finally asleep. In the car, on the way to the grocery store. But I also found strength I didn't know I had. Every day I kept going was a victory. Every time I made Mia smile or laugh, it reminded me why I had to keep fighting. I won't pretend it was easy. It wasn't. I felt betrayed, abandoned, heartbroken. But I also started to see that maybe, just maybe, Tyler leaving was the beginning of something I hadn't expected. A chance to rebuild, to create a life for Mia and me that wasn't defined by his absence, but by our resilience. And that's what I held on to in those darkest moments. That somehow, we'd be okay. That I'd figure it out, not because I was controlling, but because I was strong. Because I had to be. Because Mia needed me to be. It started small. A few weeks after Tyler left, I noticed a change in the way people spoke to me, or didn't speak to me at all. At first, I chalked it up to awkwardness. After all, breakups are messy, and people don't always know what to say. But as the days turned into weeks, the shift became impossible to ignore. Calls I used to get regularly from his family just stopped. Friends I'd known for years grew distant, their voices tight and uncomfortable when we spoke, their texts becoming fewer and farther between. One evening, I got a message from a mutual friend, someone who had always been kind to me. Her words were hesitant, almost apologetic. "Hey, I thought you should know. Tyler's been saying some stuff. I didn't want to believe it, but I figured you should be aware." My stomach dropped. I stared at my phone, rereading the message over and over. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather outside. I called her immediately, my heart pounding in my chest. She sounded uneasy, like she hated being caught in the middle. "He's telling people that you left him, that you just walked out one day and left him to take care of Mia by himself, that he's been struggling to hold everything together since you abandoned them." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I actually felt the room spin a little as I tried to process what she was saying. Me? Abandon Mia? I couldn't even fathom it. I hadn't spent more than a few hours away from my daughter since the day she was born. I'd been the one up at night, the one changing diapers, the one rocking her through the endless crying spells. How could he tell people that? And more terrifying, how could they believe it? That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept going over every conversation I'd had since Tyler left, rethinking every weird interaction, every cold glance or clipped word. It all made sense now. The judgmental silence from his family. The friends who stopped calling. The vague, polite smiles from people who used to hug me when they saw me at the grocery store. I felt like I was living in some twisted alternate reality where the truth didn't matter. Tyler had always been good at spinning stories, at making himself the victim when things went wrong. But I never thought he'd go this far. Never thought he'd stoop so low as to paint me as the villain in his made-up tragedy. Then came the social media posts. I wasn't looking for them. I tried to stay off his pages for my own peace of mind, but friends would send them to me, or I'd see them pop up in shared spaces. Photos of him holding Mia. Photos he must have taken in the rare moments he actually did interact with her during visits arranged through lawyers. Captions like, "Doing my best for my little girl, even when it's hard," and "Some people give up when it gets tough, but I'll never stop fighting for her." The comments made me sick. People praising him for being a dedicated dad. Friends and acquaintances writing things like, "Stay strong, bro," and "She's lucky to have you." And underneath it all, the unspoken narrative that I was the one who'd given up, the one who'd walked away, leaving him to play hero. I felt powerless, watching this lie spread like wildfire while I stayed silent, trying to protect Mia from the ugliness of it all. I didn't want to engage in a public battle, didn't want to stoop to his level. But it hurt, God, it hurt, to see how easily people believed him. How quickly they turned their backs on me without ever asking for my side of the story. I tried to remind myself that the people who truly knew me, who knew my heart, would see through it. But the truth is, when someone you love paints you as the villain, it leaves a mark. It makes you question yourself, even when you know the truth. There were nights when I'd sit alone in our small apartment, watching Mia sleep, and wonder how it had come to this. How the man who once swore he'd love me forever could turn me into the enemy in the eyes of everyone we knew. I thought about all the times I'd forgiven him, all the times I'd covered for him, all the times I'd hoped he'd change. And now here I was, left to clean up the mess he'd made, while he played the part of the wronged, devoted father. The worst part wasn't even the lies themselves, it was the isolation they created. Every time his family went silent, every time a friend stopped calling, it felt like losing another piece of the life I'd built. Like the rug was being pulled out from under me, one thread at a time. I remember trying to reach out to his mother once. I thought maybe if I could talk to her, explain what was really going on, she'd understand. We'd always been close, or at least I thought we had. But when I called, she barely let me get a word in. Her voice was cold, distant. "I don't want to get in the middle of this, Amber," she said. "I'm sure you both have your side of the story." It felt like a slap in the face. I wasn't asking her to take sides, I just wanted her to see Mia, to care about her granddaughter. But the walls were already up, and I realized in that moment that Tyler's lies had done their damage. I felt so small, so defeated. But at the same time, I knew I had to keep going. For Mia. For myself. I couldn't control what Tyler said or what people chose to believe. All I could do was keep showing up for my daughter, keep being the mother she deserved, no matter what the world thought of me. And slowly, that became my focus. The truth didn't change just because people didn't see it. I knew who I was. I knew what I'd done. I knew the sacrifices I'd made, the love I'd given, the nights I'd stayed up with Mia while Tyler was out living his life. I stopped looking at his social media. I stopped chasing people who didn't want to hear the truth. I poured everything I had into being there for Mia. Because at the end of the day, the only person whose opinion truly mattered was hers. It wasn't easy. The lies still stung. The judgment still hurt. But every smile, every giggle, every milestone Mia reached reminded me that the life I was building, no matter how hard it was real. It was honest. And no amount of lies could take that away. If you had asked me back when Tyler and I first found out I was pregnant what I thought life as a mother would look like, I never would have pictured this. I had dreams of a cozy little family, of sharing those first milestones with someone who loved Mia as much as I did, of building a home filled with laughter and love. Instead, what I got was something I never imagined, a crash course in survival, in sacrifice, in discovering just how far I could stretch myself for the sake of my daughter. I remember the first few weeks after Tyler left like they were yesterday. Every morning I'd wake up, exhausted before the day even began, and feel that hollow space beside me in the bed where he used to be. It wasn't just the absence of him, it was the absence of everything he'd promised, of the support I'd counted on, of the partnership I'd built my life around. And yet, the world didn't pause for my heartbreak. Mia still needed to be fed. Bills still needed to be paid. So I got up. Every single day, I got up. I took the first job I could find. Nothing glamorous, nothing close to what I'd imagined I'd be doing at this stage of my life. It was long hours on my feet, dealing with rude customers, cleaning up messes, and forcing a smile when I felt like crying. The pay was barely enough to cover rent on our tiny apartment, let alone food, diapers, clothes, and the endless little expenses that come with raising a baby. But it was something. It was a start. There were days I walked miles with Mia in her stroller because I couldn't afford to put gas in the car. I'd time our walks around her nap schedule, hoping the motion would help her sleep while I tried to figure out how to make it to payday without the gas gauge hitting empty. In the winter, I'd bundle her up in layers of hand-me-downs from thrift stores and friends, praying the cold wouldn't seep through and make her sick. I learned to stretch every dollar until it screamed. I clipped coupons like it was a second job. I skipped meals so Mia could have what she needed. I wore the same pair of shoes until the soles started to come apart, too proud or maybe too ashamed to ask for help. Every shopping trip was a balancing act of what I could live without so Mia could have what she deserved. Formula over fresh food for me. Diapers over a new coat when mine was threadbare. And through it all, there was this constant ache, the kind of bone-deep fatigue that comes from not just physical exhaustion but emotional too. There were moments when I doubted everything, when I questioned whether I was enough, whether I could really do this on my own, whether Mia would look back one day and see strength or see failure. The loneliness was its own kind of heavy. There was no one to share the load, no one to tag in when I needed a break, no one to cheer me on when I got it right or hold me when I fell apart. Nights were the hardest. After Mia was asleep, I'd sit in the quiet and let the tears come. Not because I wasn't grateful. I was. I was so grateful for my little girl. But because I was human, and the weight of it all was sometimes too much to carry in silence. And yet, in the midst of all that struggle, there were moments that made it all worth it. The first time Mia smiled at me, really smiled, I felt something in me heal just a little. Like maybe I was doing okay. Like maybe she saw me, saw how hard I was trying, even if she couldn't understand it yet. Her first laugh was like music. I remember the exact moment. She was sitting in her high chair, playing with a spoon, and for whatever reason, something struck her as funny. The sound of her giggles filled our little kitchen, and I laughed too, tears streaming down my face because it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. Her first steps, I was the only one there to see them. And as bittersweet as that was, knowing there was no one to turn to and say, "Did you see that?" I wouldn't trade those moments for anything. They were ours. Just me and Mia, figuring it out together. Every time she reached a milestone, it felt like a small victory, not just for her, but for me too. Proof that I was doing something right, even when it felt like I was failing at everything else. I learned how to be both mom and dad. I was the one who kissed her boo-boos, who tucked her in at night, who taught her to say, please and thank you. I was the one who showed up at doctor's appointments, who sat through sleepless nights with a hand on her back, who clapped the loudest at every little achievement. I played tea party and catch. I read bedtime stories in silly voices and fixed broken toys. And through all of it, I found a strength I didn't know I had. There were still moments of shame, when I'd have to say no to playdates because I couldn't afford gas, or when I'd see other moms with partners beside them, helping carry the car seat or pushing the stroller. I'd feel invisible, like my struggles didn't matter because I was just a single mom, as if that explained everything and excused everyone else from caring. But Mia saw me. That's what kept me going. Every time her eyes lit up when I walked into a room, every time her little arms wrapped around my neck, every time she looked at me like I was her whole world, I knew I had to keep fighting. For her. For us. It wasn't the life I'd planned. It wasn't the life I'd wanted. But it was ours. And despite the heartache, despite the exhaustion, despite the endless uphill climb, it was filled with love. Real love. The kind that's built not on promises or pretty words, but on showing up, day after day, no matter how hard it gets. And at the end of each day, when I'd finally collapse into bed, I'd remind myself of that. I might not have had much. I might not have had help. But I had Mia. And she had me. And somehow that was enough. There's something no one really tells you about surviving heartbreak and betrayal. The day comes when you realize you've made it farther than you ever thought you could. It doesn't happen all at once. There's no flashing sign that says, you did it. You're strong now. It happens in the quiet moments. The mornings when you get out of bed without feeling that crushing weight on your chest, the evenings when you smile because your child's laughter fills the room, the times you look in the mirror and see a woman who kept going when it would have been easier to give up. For me, it started small. A shift at work that went well. A manager pulling me aside to say they noticed how hard I'd been working, how reliable I'd been, how good I was with customers. I hadn't expected it. I'd been so focused on surviving, on keeping Mia fed and clothed, that I hadn't noticed I'd been quietly building something solid at my job. That conversation turned into an opportunity, a promotion that meant slightly better hours, a little more pay. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a step forward. It meant I could breathe a tiny bit easier, that I could stop counting every penny quite so tightly. That raise meant I could move us into a better apartment, not much bigger, but safer, cleaner, warmer. I remember the first night in our new place, sitting on the floor with Mia, eating takeout because I hadn't unpacked the dishes yet. She was giggling at something on TV, and I felt this wave of peace wash over me. It wasn't the life I'd dreamed of when I was younger, but it was ours, and it was getting better. And along the way, I started finding my people. The ones who saw through the lies without me having to explain. A coworker who became a true friend, who showed up with groceries when she knew I was struggling, who offered to watch Mia when I needed a break. A neighbor who would stop and chat, who'd invite us over for dinner so I didn't have to eat alone. Slowly, the loneliness that had felt so overwhelming started to fade. I wasn't completely alone anymore. I had a small, fierce little circle who cared about me and Mia, not because they felt obligated, but because they genuinely wanted to. While I was quietly rebuilding my life, the cracks in Tyler's story started to show. At first, it was little things. Someone would mention seeing him out at bars, posting photos of himself on weekend trips, living it up like he didn't have a care in the world. People started noticing that for someone who claimed to be a struggling single dad, he sure seemed to have a lot of free time. Then came the questions. His family, who had once turned cold toward me, began to realize that something wasn't adding up. Months went by without Tyler visiting Mia. Birthdays missed. Holidays skipped. No cards, no calls, no child support checks. The image he'd painted of himself as the devoted father started to crumble under the weight of his own choices. I remember the day everything shifted. I was folding laundry, Mia playing quietly with her dolls in the corner, when my phone rang. It was Tyler's mother. I almost didn't answer. I didn't think I had it in me for another awkward, strained conversation. But something told me to pick up. Her voice was different this time. There was no coldness, no distance. Just sadness. Regret. She was crying, and before I could even say hello properly, she started apologizing. "I'm so sorry, Amber," she said, her voice thick with tears. I believed him. I believed everything he said, and I see now how wrong I was. I should have called. I should have been there for you and Mia. I don't know how to make it right, but I'm so sorry. I sat there, the laundry forgotten in my lap, tears streaming down my face. I'd waited so long for someone, anyone, from his side to see the truth. And here she was, heartbroken, realizing the damage her silence had done. I didn't say, "I told you so." I didn't throw his lies back in her face. Because by then, I had learned that dignity meant more than revenge. I had Mia to think about. My job wasn't to make his family feel bad, it was to keep building the stable, loving home my daughter deserved. So I told her it was okay. That what mattered now was what came next. That if she wanted to be part of Mia's life, the door was open. In that moment, I felt something shift inside me. The bitterness that had clung to me for so long began to loosen its grip. I realized I didn't need anyone else's validation. I didn't need people to finally admit they'd been wrong to know that I'd been right all along. The proof was in my life, in my daughter's smile, in the home I'd built brick by brick with nothing but determination and love. Tyler's mask continued to slip in the weeks that followed. More and more people saw him for who he really was. I stopped hearing the whispers, stopped feeling the weight of judgment every time I walked into a room. Because the truth has a way of coming out, no matter how hard someone tries to bury it. And me. I kept going. I kept working hard. I kept loving my daughter with everything I had. I kept showing up, day after day, for the life we were building together. And I felt pride, a deep, unshakable pride, in how far I'd come. I no longer defined myself by what Tyler had done or said. I was more than his lies, more than the girl he tried to paint as the villain. I was a mother, a provider, a survivor. I was strong, not because I hadn't fallen, but because I'd gotten back up every single time. Looking at Mia, I saw all the reasons I'd kept fighting. Every struggle, every sleepless night, every tear shed in the dark had led me to this point. And standing there, watching her laugh and play in our little living room, I knew I wouldn't change a thing. Because we had made it. We were still standing. And that was worth everything. If you had told me, back when I was holding Mia as a newborn and wondering how I was going to make it through another sleepless night, that one day I'd be standing here, 33 years old, stronger and wiser than I ever imagined, I don't think I would have believed you. Back then, I felt broken. Back then, I felt like I was barely holding myself together with duct tape and hope. But here I am. And as I look around at the life I've built, at the little girl who calls me mom and runs into my arms at the end of the day, I know that every tear, every sacrifice, every single step forward was worth it. Mia is my heart, my reason, my constant reminder that even in the darkest times, there is light. She's thriving now, a bright, curious, funny little girl who fills our home with laughter. She loves puzzles and dancing in the living room and making up silly songs. She's strong-willed, just like her mom, and I love that about her. She's safe. She's happy. She knows she is loved beyond measure, and that, more than anything, is what I fought so hard to give her. Our apartment is filled with warmth, not just from the sunlight that spills through the windows in the morning, but from the peace we've created here. There's no more walking on eggshells. No more worrying about someone else's mood swings or broken promises. It's just us, and it's enough. Tyler. He feels like a distant memory now, like a chapter one closed a long time ago. There was a time when his name could make my stomach twist, when the sound of his voice on the other end of a phone call could ruin my whole day. But not anymore. Now, when I think of him, it's not with anger. It's not with sadness. It's with gratitude, in a strange way, because he taught me what I deserve. And he taught me what I'll never, ever tolerate again. I look back at that girl I used to be, the one who believed his promises, who ignored the red flags, who tried so hard to make things work even when everything was falling apart, and I don't feel shame. I feel compassion. She was doing her best. She loved with her whole heart. She believed in something because she wanted so badly for it to be true. And when it all came crashing down, she found a way to stand up, to keep going, to protect her child, and to build a new life from the wreckage. To every other single mom out there who's been falsely accused, who's been painted as the villain in someone else's story, who's had to fight to be seen for who she really is, I see you. I know how heavy that burden is. I know what it feels like to be judged, to be doubted, to have to defend yourself against lies you never asked for. And I want to tell you this, your truth is enough. You don't have to convince the world. You don't have to waste your energy proving yourself to people who don't want to see. Just keep showing up for your child. Just keep loving them, protecting them, providing for them. That's what matters. That's what lasts. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering if I was failing Mia, if I was enough, if I was doing the right thing. But standing here now, looking at her, healthy, joyful, full of life, I know I was. I know I am. And so are you. If I could go back in time, if I could sit down with my younger self in those first awful weeks after Tyler left, I'd take her hand and I'd tell her this. You didn't fail. He did. You loved. You gave everything you had. You fought for your family. And when he walked away, you kept fighting. That's not failure. That's courage. That's strength. And I'd tell her not to waste one more tear on someone who didn't deserve her. I'd tell her that the life ahead of her, while harder than she ever expected, would also be more beautiful than she ever imagined. That she would discover reserves of strength and resilience she didn't know she had. That she would build a life for herself and her daughter that was filled with love and laughter and peace. I'd tell her that one day, she'd look back and feel proud. Proud of every sleepless night she survived, every bill she scraped together enough to pay, every milestone she celebrated alone but with joy. Proud of the home she created, of the child she raised, of the woman she became. And now I don't define myself by what I've been through, but by what I've overcome. I am independent. I am capable. I am enough. I am no one's victim. I am a mother who kept going, who keeps going, who will always keep going, for Mia and for myself. Tyler's lies may have hurt me once, but they don't define me. They don't define Mia. They don't define the life we're living now. The truth came out, as it always does. And even if it hadn't, even if people had kept believing him, it wouldn't have changed a thing. Because what matters is what happens inside these four walls, in the moments Mia and I share, in the love and safety we've built together. Every day, I wake up grateful. Grateful for the strength I found. Grateful for the lessons I learned. Grateful for my daughter, who reminds me every day why I kept fighting. And I hope that anyone who hears my story, who's walking a similar path, knows that they can do it too. That they are stronger than they think. That no matter what lies someone spreads, no matter how hard the road gets, they can build a life filled with love and peace and joy. Because if I can do it, so can you.